Welcome to Bridge City News. I'm Hal Roberts. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Hundreds of thousands of refugees flee Ukraine as the war between Ukraine and Russia intensifies. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau discusses what new sanctions Ottawa will lay on Russia as a result of the invasion of Ukraine. And Alberta Premier Jason Kenney discusses in more detail which of the COVID-19 restrictions are being removed March 1st.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. As the war between Ukraine and Russia escalates, hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians are now fleeing their country. The United Nations says more than 200,000 have left Ukraine, crossing the borders at neighboring Romania and Poland. The numbers today, however, may be even larger, at closer to 500,000 refugees.
Коли приїхала, сіла на потяг зі Львова і сюди, це було дуже важко, людей було дуже багато, це було страшно, як і фізично небезпечно, так і ментально небезпечно. Люди в стресі, люди скажені, люди, коли людям страшно, то вони дуже егоїстичні і вони зовсім забувають, що існують інші, окрім них, і тому дуже багато травм людей від того, що вони їхали в тому потязі.
The first talks aimed at ending the war in Ukraine ended Monday with no agreement except to keep talking. 5 days into Russia's invasion, and the Kremlin again raised the potential of a nuclear war, while an embattled Ukraine moved to solidify its ties in the West by applying to join the European Union. A top Putin aide said the talks lasted nearly 5 hours with no resolution. Both parties did agree, however, to continue discussions in the coming days. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Canada will continue with coordinated sanctions against Russia over its invasion of Ukraine. Trudeau says Canada will also support the removal of Russia from the SWIFT payment system, which connects thousands of banks around the world.
The world is witnessing the horrors of President Putin's war of choice. This is a brutal, needless attack on a sovereign, democratic country. It is an atrocity for Ukraine's over 40 million innocent citizens and for the world. Canada is announcing our third set of severe, coordinated sanctions. First, we will be imposing sanctions on President Putin and his fellow architects of this barbaric war, his chief of staff and foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov. These men bear the greatest responsibility for the death and destruction occurring in Ukraine. Additionally, I am confirming Canada's support to remove Russia from the SWIFT payment system, a critical part of the global banking system.
The International Olympic Committee is urging sports bodies to exclude Russian athletes and officials from international events, including the World Cup of Soccer. The call also applied to athletes and officials from Belarus, which allowed Russia to use its territory to station troops and launch military attacks. The IOC says it was needed to protect the integrity of global sports competitions and for the safety of all participants. The World Curling Federation has changed its rules as part of a process that will let it remove Russia from next month's World Women's Curling Championships in Prince George, British Columbia. The federation says it strongly condemns Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The International Ice Hockey Federation also met to determine the participation of Russia and Belarus in a tournament in Alberta later this August. An unwanted surprise has made its way to many gas stations across southern Alberta: rising gas prices. Now, many blame the hike on the Russia-Ukrainian war. Dan McTagg, the president of Canadians for Affordable Energy, says the war is simply a crowning stroke on Canada's limited oil supply.
I'm not surprised to see gas stations moving to 153.9, Calgary 155.9, here in Lethbridge. That extra penny or so reflects sometimes the transportation costs from the terminals. But it is definitely a reminder that we live in unusual times, not just with respects to what's happened with Russia and the Ukraine. Russia's attack on Ukraine is sort of icing on the cake. The fact is we have been undersupplied in oil for quite some time. And we've had demagogues, leaders, media, everybody basically saying we can do with less oil and less gas. Well, how's that working out? It's not. We have a significant fundamental disconnect between demand, which is surging, over 100 million barrels a day now, and supply, which is about 97 million barrels a day.
Russian President Vladimir Putin's propaganda machine appears to be working overtime these days, spreading false stories about why Russia invaded Ukraine. Now, one story circulating is how Russia went into Ukraine to destroy American biolabs that are allegedly creating new viruses. Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, doesn't buy it.
If that were the case, Hal, Russia has the capability of doing all sorts of cyber attacks and pinpointed attacks to take out those labs. And had they done that, we would have applauded them. If that were the case, we would have applauded them. You wouldn't have this condemnation. You wouldn't have people from all political stripes standing on the corner in Los Angeles protesting them, or in all sorts of cities and all over Europe protesting this. You wouldn't have had casualties in the 300 and 400s, for no reason.
Lisa Daftari will also discuss some of the success Ukraine has had in its war with Russia. Details are coming up later in our broadcast. Ukrainians in New York City gathered at a Ukrainian Catholic church over the weekend to pray for their country. Many at the prayer service said they were surprised by the Russian invasion.
What is happening right now is all the atrocities and the crimes that are being committed. Just simply this assault is a crime. Is a crime against humanity, because you do not solve political differences in this way.
I'm trying to be in touch with my family, with my friends back in Ukraine, and I see what's going on. After first shock, people got angry. They got really, really angry. They organized their own defense back on the spots, learning how to do cocktail Molotov, people, everybody, trying to protect our country,
After calls from the Ukrainian community, the government of Alberta will ban the sale of Russian-made and imported liquor products. The Alberta Gaming, Liquor and Cannabis Commission said it would no longer accept any new stock of Russian-made liquor and would not sell any current stock to retailers. The ban takes effect immediately. A rally over the weekend drew hundreds of people from across Lethbridge who stood in solidarity with Ukraine. BCN's Angela Stewart was there and heard from some protesters who said it was great to see the community come together and show support.
Chanting could be heard from the steps of City Hall over the weekend, where people from all over Lethbridge came together to stand in solidarity with Ukraine. Hundreds of supporters holding signs with the messages, "Support Ukraine, pray for Ukraine," and even "Stop the war." After hearing about the events unfolding in his home country, rally organizer Misha Perevrasa says he couldn't just sit back and watch.
My wife received a call from Ukraine that the war started. So I wasn't able to just sit. I don't know, it just was something internal inside me. So it turned me out to the position where I have to do something.
Perevrasa, who has family in Ukraine, told reporters he can't believe what's happening and he fears for his relatives.
They are under the bombing right now. So they just sit in the basement. It's terrible. I just cannot imagine anybody from you sit in the basement and think that maybe some bomb will fly to your house.
Some local officials could also be seen in attendance showing their support and standing in solidarity. Liberal Party candidate Devin Hargreaves says the events unfolding in Ukraine hits close to home.
I have family in Ukraine, in Lviv, so it is a very personal issue for me as well. We've got family, friends.
This supporter, Tom Frankish, says some of his closest friends are currently fighting in the war.
These are my homies. They've all been conscripted to fight in the war. It's hard to sit here on the other side of the world while your friends are in harm's way.
Organizers say they hope the rally sent a strong message.
We have to stop shootings. We have to stop bombing right now. This is what we want as of now.
For Bridge City News, I'm Angela Stewart.
Well, it wasn't a bad start to the work week here in southwestern Alberta with mild temperatures. Jeanette Rocher is here with an early peek at the forecast. Jeanette, we should enjoy this while we can since the mercury will be dropping and more snow is on the way.
Yes, we absolutely should. Hell, I know. In fact, I was outside earlier today without a jacket on. So look at these lovely double-digit teen temperatures these next 2 days, looking up to a high of 15 degrees on a Tuesday. Could be a record breaker. I know today was actually the hot spot in Canada was Clare's home, Alberta, in southern Alberta. But like you said, that's about to change because we're going to suddenly dip into the minuses and some flurries are on the way. I will tell you all about that coming up later on in the newscast. Thanks so much, Jeanette. A couple from Alaska has been charged with 5 offenses following a vehicle search at the Coots border crossing here in southern Alberta. Border agents found 2 prohibited assault-style rifles, 4 9mm handguns, a .45 caliber handgun, and high-capacity magazines, all in a motorhome. Adam and Bethany Brown are facing charges including possessing a prohibited gun with ammunition and making false statements. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney announced that the province will be removing most of the COVID-19 restrictions March 1st. That includes the provincial mask mandate and limits on social gatherings. Kenney adds students will also be impacted by the removal of conditions.
We will lift remaining school requirements and we'll end health screening before youth activities, which is the only remaining measure applied to children and teenagers. We will also lift the mandatory work from home order, and let me say that's going to be great news for the downtown cores in our 2 big cities as workers come back to their offices.
Premier Kenney says the steps being taken are based on hospitalization rates, which continue to trend downwards. Premier Kenney also announced a minor cabinet shuffle. Tyler Shandro is now the new Justice Minister and Solicitor General, and Casey Medu, who used to have that portfolio, will become the new Labour and Immigration Minister. Medu, who was our province's Justice Minister, had been suspended from the cabinet position following an investigation into a phone call he made to the Edmonton Police Chief 11 months ago regarding a distracted driving ticket. Elected officials and some officers of the Lethbridge Police Service took part in the Polar Plunge for Special Olympics, a great cause. After 2 years of the plunge being held virtually, organizers say they were happy to have a smaller group come out, bear the cold, and take a dip for a great cause. Constable Braylon Higgins says they've received a number of donations so far.
Team was just over $2,000. I think we're still a few donations trickling in, so we're just about $2,200 for our team thus far. And the province has a goal of 100,000, and I think we're over 60,000 at the moment. So that's not including any of the cash donations that'll be yet coming in, but that's all the online donations. We're slowly getting there. So this will go till middle of March, so hopefully we can meet our goal.
Now, the Alberta Law Enforcement Torch Run hopes to raise around $150,000 this year. As part of Black History Month, the province is investing close to $145,000 into the John Ware Youth Empowerment Program over the next 2 years. The initiative is designed by the Global Village Centre in Brooks and honors the legacy of John Ware, who was a black rancher and one of the first ranchers to settle here in our province. He was also born into slavery in the 1800s, and after gaining his freedom, he came to Brooks, Alberta. Premier Jason Kenney says immigration has been an integral part of our province's history.
Immigration policy that settled the Canadian West 140 years ago, you know, it was based, it wasn't about just putting more people in Toronto and Montreal in the late 1800s. It was about getting people out here to the prairies. It was a geographically targeted and focused immigration strategy that developed these communities. We need to get back to that.
Officials say Brooks has the 5th highest percentage of minorities in the province, and the program will provide mentorship and scholarships to 60 newcomers and minorities in the city. This week should have been the first time University of Lethbridge students were able to come back to in-person learning. Instead, the university's Faculty Association is entering into its 3rd week of a strike. Both the Board of Governors and the faculty are at a stalemate with their bargaining, and students just received notice that when the strike does end, the rest of the semester will be online. As a result, student solidarity appears to be rising. Many are arriving at campus to express their frustration and conduct a sit-in outside of the President and Vice President's offices.
We think that if they actually cared about us as students and the professors and actually were bargaining in good faith, they would have been at the table already. They would have resolved all this. Like in every other institution that has gone through this exact situation, they've already resolved all of their issues, and they have done it much more amicably than what is happening at this university. Like, it seems that they are using a scorched earth approach. They are trying to make an example out of us, and I think they really chose the wrong institution to be doing that.
We are the biggest stakeholders on this campus, and people need to start acting like we are. We pay their wages. We pay for them to work. We don't pay to get stuck outside of a strike that they knew was going to happen. We have students here who they're worried about their summer. We have students worried about their housing. We just got a letter from housing right now from students who are just told that if they have to extend the semester, they're going to be charged more to live there, which is ridiculous. This isn't our fault.
Now, as part of the sit-in, students are also asking for refunds on tuition, a vote of no confidence on the heads of administration, and an end to faculty restructuring. A Lethbridge combat sports group meets up every week here in our city to practice their best swordsmanship. Members share a love of medieval warfare with armor and weapons. As Micah Quinn explains now, they not only compete locally, but also in international tournaments.
The Lethbridge Company of the Black Spears are part of the Heavily Armored Combat Sports Association. There are 21 members in the Lethbridge Company who battle each other in fully armored combat or lighter swords and armor during practice. Team Captain Brian Boyson and member Travis Haynes each have a long history with the group.
So years and years ago, I saw some guys fighting in suits of armor in this very park just on the other end of the lake. I stopped to go and talk to them, and 17 years later, I'm still doing armored combat in one form or another.
This started out with a joke with my girlfriend, now wife. I said if we ever get married, I'm not wearing pants to the wedding. And I didn't. I wore a kilt, but that kind of made me find the medieval stuff in this area. And I got hooked with the heavy fighting.
When the company started out, members would make their own armor and have helmets locally made. But once they got bigger, they started to find and source armor from armorers in different parts of Europe. As for the weapons, they are all blunted, and there are a wide variety that each member uses.
So there's saber, there's pole arm, which is a stick with something on the end of it, so a two-handed weapon. There's sword and shield.
Longsword and great sword's one of the newest categories, and that is any sword over 5 feet long.
The newest member of the company, Michaela Crump, is the only female within the group. She says she got into the sport by going to tournaments, and after that, it was full speed ahead.
Get up there and cheer and help people with their armor, and then I got asked to put in armor myself. But it was just amazing to watch them beat each other up like viciously with the swords and then come off and hug each other, and just like the camaraderie is amazing.
Company member William L. Bolico says there are teams all across Canada and the United States as well, and anyone is welcome to join the Lethbridge group.
And you don't even have to be in good shape. There's so many people, different shapes and sizes, different backgrounds. Some of us who've never done athletics of any sort before.
The Lethbridge Company of the Black Spears practice at the Henderson Lake Gunnery Point Picnic Shelter every Saturday from 3 to 5 p.m. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
That looks like a lot of fun. Well, it's hard to believe it's the end of February here with the mild temperatures we've been experiencing in southwestern Alberta, but a cooling trend with more snow is on the way. Full weather details are on deck. We were well above our seasonal high for this time of year, 3 degrees, and that should continue, but only for the short term. Jeanette Rocher is back with a complete look at the weather picture. Jeanette, let's enjoy the warmer temperature while we can, since snow and colder temperatures may be on the way later this week.
Yeah, for sure, Hal. And what a warm day it was indeed, and without a lot of wind either. But as you said, that warmth will be short-lived because some minus temperatures and flurries are on their way soon. Looking into this evening even, we are looking at a 30% chance of showers. Showers could continue a bit into Tuesday, but look at that high. We're talking 15 degrees. Will it be a record breaker? We'll have to wait and see. The record on that day was back in 1994. It was 14.08. So we'll have to see if we break a record on Tuesday. Into Wednesday, though, completely different story, dropping down to -2, chance of flurries. Flurries lasting right through the week. Thursday, Friday, into Saturday with -6 as a temperature on Thursday, -7 Friday, and -3 on Saturday, up to 2 degrees on Sunday with partly cloudy skies. So we are about to get a little bit of a cold front coming in. Average high for this time of year, 3 degrees, -9 the average low. High temperature on this day was back in 1992. It was 19 degrees. Our low temperature on this day, -32 back in 1962. Sun rose today at 7:16 a.m. and our sunset at 6:11, giving us just under 11 hours of daylight. Look at that. Look how bright the days are staying lately. Love it. 40% chance of showers expected tomorrow on the coast for both Victoria and Vancouver. 13 the high in Victoria, 12 degrees the high in Vancouver. We're looking at a chance of flurries tomorrow in Edmonton with a high of -5. A high of 11 degrees, though, in Calgary tomorrow with partly cloudy skies. Expecting those Chinook winds tomorrow as well, 20 to 40 kilometers per hour. In Saskatoon, -10 the high. 60% chance of flurries there. Looking at some flurries expected tomorrow as well in Regina, -5 the high, -10 in Winnipeg. Also looking at chance of risk of frostbite and some wind chill there as well. Looking at 60% chance of flurries in Toronto, 4 degrees the high, 5 centimeters of snow expected tomorrow in Ottawa, -8 the high, -7 the high tomorrow in Montreal. Montreal getting quite a bit of snow with 10 to 15 centimeters expected. -4 the high tomorrow in Fredericton, -2 in Halifax with beautiful sunny skies there. -7 the high in Charlottetown and -8 tomorrow in St. John's, Newfoundland with a chance of snow as well. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
As the conflict with Ukraine deepens, the fallout from tough sanctions on Russia reverberates throughout the global markets. Safe havens like gold, bonds, and the U.S. dollar rallied on Monday. Crude oil also surged. Investors face soaring global commodity prices on top of already elevated inflation and slowing global growth after the pandemic recovery. They're also trying to get a handle on how central banks may look at how monetary policy will meet those challenges. Russia has closed its airspace to carriers from 36 countries, including many in Europe and Canada. The move follows a decision by the European Union and Canada to close their skies to all Russian planes in response to Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. Russia's state aviation industry says planes from those countries could only enter Russia's airspace with special permission. Toronto Dominion Bank announced a $13.4 billion takeover of First Horizon Corporation. Company officials say this would expand TD's presence in the United States beyond the East Coast. TD is not the only bank trying to gain a competitive advantage south of the border. In December, BMO agreed to purchase BNP Paribas SA Banks of the West unit for $16.3 billion, giving it a presence as well in the western United States. Reports say Canada's 6 largest banks already hold around 90% of the deposits in Canada. And financial experts say many banks are looking for more of a financial footprint in the United States, home to 330 million people. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 20 points on the day to finish at 21,126. The Dow was down 166 points to 33,892. The S&P 500 was down 10 points to 4373, and the Nasdaq was up 56 points to 13,571. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up $4.13 on the day to $95.72 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 7 cents to $4.40 US. Gold was down a cent to $19.0898 US an ounce, and silver was even at $24.45 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $11.97 per bushel, barley's at $9.58, canola's at $23.59, and corn is at $11.30 per bushel. Live cattle were up $1.23 to $140.50, feeder cattle were down $2.30 to $157.73, and lean hogs were down 18 cents to $103.50. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to $78.90 US. Recapping one of our top stories, the first talks aimed at ending the war in Ukraine ended Monday with no agreement except to keep talking. 5 days into Russia's invasion, and the Kremlin again raised the potential of a nuclear war, while an embattled Ukraine moved to solidify its ties in the West by applying to join the European Union. More talks are scheduled in the coming days. There's been talk of NATO sending in troops and fighter jets to help Ukraine in its war with Russia. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari will have details for us in just a moment.
Here's today's Bridge City News community calendar. Southern Alberta's largest home and garden show returns. The 2022 Home and Garden Show is taking place from March 30th to April 2nd at Exhibition Park in Lethbridge. With over 270 exhibitors, you'll discover a wide range of home and garden products, from flooring and cabinets to hot tubs and fireplaces, and much, much more. Admission is $8.50, $7.50 for seniors, and children 12 and under can enter for free. Parking fee is $5. For tickets and for more information, visit hglethbridge.ca. Lethbridge Sport Council's Indoor Roving Gyms program is taking place Tuesdays at Emmanuel Lutheran Church from 6 to 7 p.m. and Thursdays at the Service Sports Center from 10 to 11 a.m. This program is for kids ages 5 and under and their caregivers. Come and enjoy an hour of fun and get active. Pre-registration is required and space is limited. For details and to register, visit lethbridgesportcouncil.ca/roving-gyms. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
There are now 5 countries that are supporting the Russian invasion of Ukraine. To talk about this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining us once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, I'm guessing China is one of the culprits. How about some of the others?
Yeah, great guess. This is an original content piece that we have up at the Foreign Desk. We're looking at the rogue nations that are supporting the invasion into Ukraine. And as you said, the usual suspects. We're looking at Syria, Iran, Venezuela, North Korea, and China. Rogue nations that obviously support Putin going on and going against world opinion. That sounds familiar, right? What's amazing about this is that at a moment when you have the truckers convoy, you have all these mandates dividing up Western nations, this invasion has actually brought together both sides to say that we disagree with what Putin is doing, we disagree with what Russia is doing. And regardless of the actual policy, for example, here in the United States, I think people are slow to condemn Biden if they voted for him and obviously quick to condemn Biden if they didn't. Otherwise, we are seeing a lot of bipartisan support on the actual move into Ukraine, which is a good thing. We're seeing support from the Europeans and the Western continent, of course, all throughout the Middle East. You have moderate nations that are in support of the Ukrainians and obviously the rogue ones who are not. So the globe is divided up in a way that's you would have guessed, right? It's always the ones that are in support of freedom and the sovereign nation of Ukraine who are trying to stop this or trying to pull out any moves they can to at least slow the move of the Russians into Ukraine.
Now, as Russia's invasion into Ukraine continues, many are wondering what NATO's doing about it to respond to the Russian aggression. I know, Lisa, that Ukraine is not a NATO country, but will NATO step up to the plate and maybe send troops and aircraft to help in the battle?
Ukraine is not part of NATO. They have not even applied to be part of NATO, but that's the conversation. And many people believe that the premise of this entire move into Ukraine by the Russians is because they don't want NATO to accept Ukraine, because then they would be surrounded by all NATO nations. By the same token, NATO is looking at this perhaps and saying, well, our NATO nations do surround this conflict, and maybe it would behoove us to step in and help a neighboring nation, even though Ukraine is not part of NATO. It's a very, very complicated discussion over what will be done. We know that NATO and many of the European nations have decided to send over supplies to at least help beef up the assets of the Ukrainian military. And look, it's working to some extent. We're being told by reports and those on the ground that the Russian calculation was completely off, and they believe that they would get much further than they have at this point. So, the support that we've seen thus far, without escalation, because we have to also factor that in, has deterred the Russians from getting further than they had hoped, which is again a very positive move. Now, if there is military action by an outside, a third party like a NATO or the EU, or the United States, it's going to escalate the situation. It's going to push things into a completely different conversation. So I think people are, including NATO, the EU, the United States, are standing by and watching this very, very closely.
Sounds like things may already be escalating. Russian President Vladimir Putin escalated some tensions by ordering Russian nuclear forces to be put on high alert. I mean, he issued a directive to increase the readiness of Russia's nuclear weapons, raising fears that the invasion of Ukraine could lead to that nuclear war, Lisa.
Exactly. And this is what is so, so frightening about this. Obviously, we know Russia's capabilities militarily, nuclear, and really the craziness, for lack of a better word, to actually go through with this. Yet, we also are hearing talks about ceasefire talks on the border. This news broke last night that there would be talks. Now, in the background, just as you and I are speaking, moments before we went on air, we heard that there were missiles that were heard in Kyiv, which again, it speaks to, where are you on this ceasefire? Where are you on the talks? If you have agreed to talks, and we know that both sides have, then why are we still hearing these missiles? And why are they getting closer and closer to the center? The interesting thing about this, Hal, is if you would have asked me when, Russia was on the 1 yard line and we said, are they going to invade? Are they not? The answer was always, well, if they do, it's because Russia wants the Ukraine to be annexed as part of this, Russian empire, to go back to the Soviet time. But now we're seeing such a high number of casualties. We're seeing, and that's what's mind-boggling. If you're trying to annex these people, if you're trying to bring them under your flag, then the casualties, families, babies on the run, hiding in basements. I actually have a source that I'm speaking to and helping. She started out as a source, and now I'm trying to help her get out of the country because her and her family were stuck in a basement with young children. And these are the individuals who are, just civilians. They're not military personnel, and they have taken up arms and grenades and whatever they can get their hands on in order to defend and fight for their country and for their sovereign country to remain sovereign. So it's a crazy story. It's very difficult, and I'll tell you this, Hal, I can't underscore this enough. It's very difficult to calculate or to get into the mind of Putin and what he's going to do next. And that's the scariest part of this whole thing.
Well, I mean, if the USSR broke up maybe a few years ago, that's one thing. But we're talking about 1991. This is a long time ago. These countries have moved on. They have their own culture, their independence, their own way of doing things with their own government. So this is a huge undertaking. And this is something that the world is definitely watching. And Russian troops continue to advance on Kyiv, the capital, as we talked about. But so far, Lisa, the Ukrainian forces are continuing to resist.
Yes, these are beautiful stories, Hal, and I'm sure, people have had a chance to see so many of them on social media. And thanks to social media, we have access to people all over the country. We know that there's so many groups of aid workers that are trying to help these individuals and families get out. But those who are remaining are fighting with everything they have. The president, Zelensky, he's amazing. I mean, for somebody to really, roll up his sleeves and say, I don't know if you've seen the meme, it's, I don't need a ride, I need ammunition. He's not trying to get out of the country. And you can juxtapose that with Trudeau in your country, who heard some honking of horns and ran for the hills. This guy's rolling up his sleeves and he's saying, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to maintain this, my power and my country. And that's exactly right. There is such a deep sense of patriotism in Ukraine, and these are sad, sad stories. It's very moving to watch these young people, young and old, actually. There's a story about an 80-year-old man who shows up and says, what can I do? And it's truly beautiful to see them fight for their country the way that they are.
It definitely is. And let's also talk about some of the refugees, those who are fleeing Ukraine right now. As the missiles continue to rain down on Ukrainian cities, hundreds of thousands of civilians, mainly women and children, are fleeing into some of the neighboring countries.
Yes. And so the source that I talked to, her first request was, I need to get my family anywhere into Europe. And then it became, all I need is, some sort of bus ticket out of over the borders. She eventually was able to reach out, but I posted on social media. There was an outpour of responses on groups that are, many of them actually Jewish groups that are going in there, whether from Israel or the United States. These are nonprofits that are going in and trying to help these people get out, Jewish and non-Jewish, of course, and they're helping anyone that needs help. But the wonderful thing is that social media has been able to get them phone numbers and get them Facebook pages and WhatsApp accounts so that they can connect with these individuals that can help them either get that bus ticket or train ticket or whatever it takes to get them out of harm's way. But there is just an incredible amount of footage showing these babies and young children, toddlers in basements with their parents, with their mothers mostly, hiding out and just waiting and hoping that something comes through for them. But this is just awful. I can't really put words to it, but I encourage you all to try to see some of these stories to really get the true feeling and the true emotion of the Ukrainian people right now.
Yeah, pray for the people of Ukraine. Lisa, a U.S. defense official says airspace over Ukraine is still being contested amid the Russian invasion. Tell me more.
Yes, how interesting, right? You have, Putin thinking about nuclear might and now fighting for the airspace over Ukraine. Speaking of airspace, they have stopped all commercial flights from Russia and into Ukraine, and in order to prevent there being any sort of mishaps happening. We know that the Russians are famous for those kinds of mishaps, but obviously Russia is trying to, try what experts are calling a siege. They're calling it a new way forward, a new strategy, because they believe that the ground strategy that they have tried has not worked. The resistance, as mom and pop as it may be, has been working to some extent in pushing the Russians back. And because it's not happening fast enough, experts say that they're trying to go forward with a siege and to be obviously much more bombastic, much more bold in their approach. And that obviously includes claiming the airspace and trying to take over areas like Kyiv. And what does that mean? How that means that these are much more populated areas. These are areas where civilians live, families live. We saw the footage of the condo that was hit, very high building that was hit. These are all families, these are homes, these are civilians, and these are potential casualties. So again, prayers with the people of Ukraine, as you said.
The Ukrainian military has seen a little bit of success during this war as well, including a drone which allegedly took out a Russian missile system. That's according to one of the top Ukrainian officials.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? We are seeing a lot of reports about how whether it's luck or, God being on their side, whatever you want to call it, but the Ukrainians have made some major strides here. And to be able to hold up to, Russian forces, it's truly amazing. I don't know if you've been able to see some of the comps, some of the side-by-side comparisons between the Ukrainian assets and Russian assets. And albeit, the Europeans and the US and NATO has sent supplies over to Ukraine, fine, but they still cannot hold, the level of competence that the Russian military forces have. And yet you have stories like these, that they've been able to either stop a drone this way, or use a drone to stop the Russian missiles, or on the flip side, you even see people, actual people, not in non-uniform, walk in front of tanks in order to make them stop. It's tremendous. I can't underscore this enough, but the will of the people here is just tremendous.
Putin's propaganda machine is working overtime right now, spreading lies about why Russia attacked Ukraine, Lisa. One story circulating on social media says Russia attacked Ukraine to destroy American biolabs, which are being used to create new viruses. And people have actually bought into some of this propaganda.
Yeah, we're hearing all sorts of stories, and I heard this one too, that he's trying to stop this Western agenda, is what they're calling it. It's hard to believe that because of the casualties. It's hard to believe that because the attacks have been spread out. If that were the case, Hal, Russia has the capability of doing all sorts of cyber attacks and pinpointed attacks to take out those labs. And had they done that, we would have applauded them. If that were the case, we would have applauded them. You wouldn't have this condemnation. You wouldn't have people from all political stripes standing on the corner in Los Angeles protesting them, or in all sorts of cities and all over Europe protesting this. You wouldn't have had casualties in the 300s and 400s, for no reason. And let me tell you that Putin is a very calculated statesman. If he would want to win over Ukrainian favor, if he wanted those people to rally around the Russian flag, if he wanted people back at home to rally around their own flag, which he always does because he needs his constituents, a rogue leader always does, he would not have made this move. This is a very calculated move, and Putin has done his homework. Now, are there miscalculations? Of course. I don't think he ever thought the people of Ukraine would have the will or the might to stand up to the Russian forces, and they have. But all in all, in the macro picture of all of this and the aerial view of all of this, I don't buy that there was a pinpointed, a place or a target or a focus, such as a lab creating viruses. So yes, there are. The propaganda machine, as you said, is Russia's. It's an asset to them, just like their cyber military is, just like Putin's determination is as well. So I think this is just another example of the propaganda machine.
Canada, the United States, and the European Union have ratcheted up pressure on Russia, declaring that selected Russian banks will be kicked off of the SWIFT international payment system. Lisa, explain why this is such a big deal.
Yeah, so SWIFT is the central, what did the Washington Post called it? I think the Google or the Gmail of banking. So it is the center of all international banking. Certain banks have been cut off from this, and certain nations have decided to directly cut off Russian banking activity and commerce. And some took some coercion, and some did it right away. This is extremely important because obviously we're trying to hit Russia where it hurts. It's also extremely dangerous because in the long term, a lot of experts believe that this is pushing Russia into China's arms, and in doing so very quickly. We saw the same thing with the Taliban and the Iranian regime. What happens is when you run out of trade partners, you have to bring in money, you have to trade, you have to have trading partners. You're going to look to the unlikely ones that are also looking. So we're going to push Russia over to the rogue team and see them do business with countries like China and Iran and Venezuela and North Korea. And for that reason, we have to be very careful on the calculation or on the assumption that these sanctions and the banking penalties will actually work. They are working. Look, in the short term, I can tell you they are working. It's quite significant. But again, Hal, it goes back to my argument that this is such a major calculation for Putin to risk this economic death that he has. It's an economic suicide, right? So there has to be more to it than him just being this really amazing philanthropist who wants to go in and take out labs or any nefarious activity on the world stage. So all of it, connecting the dots is very important. We try to do that at the Foreign Desk with a lot of these information or explainer pieces, like 5 things you need to know about NATO or 5 things you need to know about SWIFT, so that we can kind of piece these things together. This is a very complicated foreign policy issue, and I think there's more to it than the mainstream media has been covering.
Or to it that meets the eye, definitely. Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, thanks so much for joining us from Los Angeles.
My pleasure.
Well, the government of Alberta is giving serious consideration to replacing the Rcmp with an independent Alberta Provincial Police Service, with the potential of that transition beginning in the year 2025. Now, a report by PricewaterhouseCoopers outlines that this transition could cost $366 million. Now, last year, the provincial government began shifting the cost of policing to municipalities, including Lethbridge County, but the county's position is that Alberta municipalities have not been adequately consulted on this matter. Joining me now is Lethbridge County Reeve Tori Campbell. Reeve Campbell, thanks so much for joining me today on this very important matter. So great to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Now, Lethbridge County's position is that the municipalities were not properly consulted on this. So tell us more about this. What exactly happened? How did this come about? How was the county informed of this?
Sure. So over the last, I would say, couple of years here, I mean, we'd heard initially heard whispers that this was something that it was being considered. I guess to take a step back, coming out of the Fair Deal panel that the government of Alberta had commissioned. Coming from that panel, one of the recommendations to come out of there was that the province explore the possibility of a transition to a provincial police service. As far as my recollection goes, it wasn't definitely wasn't one of the top recommendations. It was actually quite a bit lower, received quite a bit less support. But nonetheless, here we are today. It obviously has gained some momentum from the province's side, and we're on the cusp of starting some engagement sessions with the province here over the coming months.
Mm-hmm. So what are your main concerns about shifting from RCMP to a provincial police force? Is it mainly cost?
I think, yeah, definitely. Cost is obviously of a paramount concern to the county. We have a very limited amount of resources to work with, and any further strain on that has to go towards policing is obviously of great concern. We're happy with the current arrangement that we have with the RCMP. We fully acknowledge that there's work to be done to improve that relationship and to increase that level of service within the county. But at the same time, we feel that we can work within that current relationship, build and strengthen that, and come out in a favorable position.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you about your local detachment of RCMP. You must have a great relationship with them. What are their thoughts and feelings on this? Are they neutral about it? Are they happy? Are they upset? What are you hearing?
Yeah, so when we travel to Edmonton for our RMA convention, we have the opportunity to meet with K Division and talk with some higher ranking officials there within the RCMP. And we've relayed to them and will continue to that we appreciate the support that we receive. We appreciate the relationship. And what they've communicated to us is that they're very much engaged in working with us. There's been no indication from anyone on the RCMP side of the table that they want to move away from policing. I know that's kind of been bantied about a bit, but there's been no indication that there's any appetite from the RCMP to move away from that. They want to provide a service, and they want to provide it in a cost-effective manner to municipalities.
Mm-hmm. Is there any talk on what will happen to the current RCMP? Will they just have to move elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean that's so many huge unknowns. I know that when we've talked to provincial ministers, there's been a suggestion that maybe that if there were to be a transition to a provincial police service, that some of those members here in Alberta could be absorbed into that provincial police service. Obviously, there would have to be a large number of them move over just to fill those vacancies on the provincial police service side. As with many things in this issue, a lot of unanswered questions.
Yeah,
to this
so
point.
many unknowns, absolutely. So let's talk dollars and cents. So how much was Lethbridge County asked to contribute to this provincial police force?
Well, at this point in time, that's, I think, our biggest concern is that through the PricewaterhouseCoopers report, costing is one of the more glaring absences in that. There is that $366 million potential transitional cost that you mentioned, but after that, it really doesn't spell out what the ongoing costs will be, and additionally what that would mean to municipalities. I know the Premier has stated that he doesn't intend to download any further policing costs to municipalities. But without some concrete evidence to back that up, we just don't feel comfortable moving forward at this time.
Yeah, totally. And I believe I read somewhere in that report that last year the county was asked to contribute, was it $350,000? And then it's going to rise again in this next coming year to $469,000. Is that correct?
That's correct. With the information that we currently hold, you know, from that baseline where we started to looking out into the, you know, the coming years, creeping up on that $700,000 a year figure, would be our contribution from the municipality to the provincial government to offset that cost of policing in our municipality.
Right. Is this going to be a yearly burden on the county indefinitely, or is there like an end in sight, or does it just go on and on?
That's the $1 million question right now. Just looking at what's happened, where we are provincially, you know, the provincial state of affairs as it pertains to finances. I would be shocked if you know, that cost to us, the municipality, were to decrease. Obviously hopeful that if nothing else, it holds. I think all along we have acknowledged the fact that we receive a service, and I think there was an appetite to participate in paying for that service. But I think there's a pretty large discrepancy between the service that we're receiving and the cost for that. And as that ties into the potential provincial police service, there hasn't been any assurances made to us that if we were to continue paying at a similar level, we would receive an increased level of service, which obviously is concerning.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, like if this financial burden is put on the county for a provincial police force year after year, what is this taking money out of? So what are the citizens of the county going to be missing out on as a result? Or is it going to just increase their tax burden?
I think you nailed it on the head. I think that it just makes our job, and not just Lethbridge County. We're talking about municipalities throughout Alberta. It just makes our job that much more difficult. Costs continue to rise. We're dealing with some quite scary inflation figures right now. And the fact of the matter is, we continue to be downloaded upon, and that just means that, as you said, we're trying to be creative. We are being creative. We're trying to stretch that dollar as far as we can, but there comes a point where we just can't keep up anymore, and tough choices have to be made. And unfortunately, that ultimately, is going to mean reductions to levels of service, or that raise in taxes, like you said.
Right, and nobody wants that, especially these days. So what about other counties? Have you had the opportunity to talk to other municipalities? Is the cost, does it go by population? How is that figured out? Or do you know, is that one of those unknowns again?
No, the current model, that there is under the current model, there definitely are those factors that come into play that would impact how much you're paying. Population being one of those. Our discussions with rural municipalities predominantly have kind of fallen in line with our feelings. I think they're deeply concerned as well. At the end of the day, I think we all acknowledge that there's a lot of challenges facing not only rural Alberta, but the rest of Alberta as well. And this, quite frankly, just seems like a bit of a distraction at this point in time. We have a police service that's working for us. I think there's ways to work within the current system to make that system work better for our residents, other rural residents. And there's a lot of opportunity to spend some provincial tax dollars in a lot of meaningful ways that I think that could really directly impact Albertans. And I'm just not sure at this point in time we've been convinced that a provincial police service is the best route.
Yeah, exactly. Does the county have a solution to this? Instead of just coming at it with a problem that we don't like this, is there?
Well, the province is offering us some opportunity here. Like I said, they are hosting numerous engagement sessions throughout the province here throughout the coming months, and we're hopeful that when we get a chance to speak at these, that we'll be heard. We continue to share this message with our MLAs. And any minister that's willing to give us the time. We stress the importance that this bears to us, and we're hopeful that they'll listen And ultimately, if the decision is made that we do eventually transition to a provincial police service, that the costs can be managed, and that we as municipalities have a seat at the table in formulating what this will look like and how we govern it moving forward.
Interesting. Now, I understand that you have been contacting your local MLAs, but you feel that your concerns have sort of fallen on deaf ears. Was there just no response whatsoever?
I will admit it's a tough position for our MLAs to be put into. This obviously is coming. This is coming top down from the provincial government. It's a mandate that the premier and some of his senior ministers are quite committed to, especially exploring ways that the province can become more independent from Ottawa, and the rest of us are ultimately passengers in some of those discussions and how things are moving forward. So, we're fortunate. We do have a good relationship with our MLAs, but I think they can. I hope that they're listening to our message. I hope that they're carrying that up the chain. But I can't say with great certainty if they're having any success spreading that message as well.
Wow. And then as far as private citizens, what's next? What can people do?
Well, I think that part of our thought process as a municipality was to, push out some information on this, make people aware that this is being considered. We as municipal leaders, I think we're well aware of what I shouldn't say well aware. We try to make ourselves as aware as possible of what's going on, and fully, knowing full well that we have access to a very limited amount of information at times. But what we can do is take that information, push that out to our residents, and try and make the greater public aware of this issue. I think it's something at the end of the day that's going to impact everyone in one way or another. So I think it's important that we can be that bridge and try and spread that information and just let people know where we're coming from, why we've taken this position, and what our goal is moving forward.
Fantastic. Lethbridge County Reeve Tory Campbell, thank you so much for joining me today on this important matter. Glad to have you on today.
You bet. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Jeanette Roche. Thanks for watching.